Good morning and welcome to your Impact Collaborative from your Women's Fund, where we meet once a month to allow your focus to be our community's power, because we help you see what you need to know and what you can do to support women and girls in our community. Just like Miami Waterkeeper keeps an eye on the bay for me, we keep an eye on women and girls and systems for you. There's a lot that we can do when we're focused in together. So welcome, and in the name of our incredible board of directors as well, many of you are here with us today, and I know everybody else will see the recording. Thank you for your leadership and all that you do. This is a break a sweat board, a very representative and amazing board, and I'm so grateful to you each and all. Our founder, Marilyn Gladstone, is thrilled that you are here joining us today, and our incredible supporters and sponsors as well. We have many elected officials and offices of elected officials are going to be with us today, in addition to Commissioner Regalado, who is on screen for you today. And we thank our peers and community partners and direct service providers for all that you do and your partnership. We have 4 pillars, and today the pillar that we are focusing on is economic mobility. And this pillar is sponsored by the phenomenal Kaufman Rawson, a longtime supporter of economic mobility and of your Women's Fund. Every year, they do this incredible campaign with us on pay equity until we get it right. A lot of people, this is their favorite one. Hey, Daddy, why are you still paying women less? So thank you, Kaufman Rawson, for your leadership and your sponsorship of this Impact Collaborative. So on we go. We focus on data and research as one of our 4 programs, and the wonderful, brilliant Viviana Alvaro Pacheco is going to focus us with the economic mobility score. Viv.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm just going to do a super quick intro on some of the research that we have available. So as this is part of our economic mobility pillar, I'm showing here the economic mobility score from our Gender Equity Index. The Gender Equity Index is a measurement of how far Miami-Dade County is from reaching gender equity. We divided it into our 4 pillars, and for the economic mobility score in 2022, we were 57 points. As you can see, that kind of throws us in a little bit of the orange, not there yet on the green side. As we're talking about disability, next slide, Danny, please. I want to invite you all to scan the QR code because it will take you to our website, where we have included disability as a metric, but it is part of our health and well-being pillar. So if you kind of want to learn more about that, you can always go there. And if you're always interested in learning more about the economic mobility, we have policy paper so that you can see here. So please go ahead, scan the QR code. There's a lot of information on that site that I hope will be useful for all of you. Thank you.
Viv does the work so we can leverage it. Thank you much, Viviana and team. So many of you have attended Impact Collaboratives before, and you know how it works. This is a team sport. This is a participatory sport. Please do introduce yourselves in the chat. Feel free to share data and websites about where you're from, the organizations that you're with. Please join us. We also ask you to participate in all of the polls, et cetera, that will be sharing during this time. So on we go, Danny. I'm going to be very gratefully introduce our keynote for today. Dr. Jennifer DeRocher is going to introduce herself and frame this entire conversation for our panelists today. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. DeRocher.
Thank you so much for the invite. I'm really, really happy to be here today. Women in disability, particularly women in autism spectrum disorder, is really kind of one of my areas of focus and one of the areas I'm very passionate about. So I'm really happy to kind of set the stage for us today in our discussion about neurodivergence and disability, and the impact of disability on economic mobility for women and girls. I am a clinical associate professor at the University of Miami. I teach undergraduate psychology classes. I'm also the director of a statewide project called CARD. I am the director of our local CARD, UMNSU CARD, where we serve over 17,000 individuals and families affected by autism spectrum disorder in the South Florida area. And so I'm just going to kick it off with some kind of key points for us to consider. So I've pulled a little data for you. And, you know, this is an area that's near and dear to my heart. My population of clients with autism spectrum disorder are aging. When I started in the field, they were very young. And now we have, you know, about 30–40% of our clients, if not more now, are in adulthood. And so understanding employment rates is really important. And I want to put neurodivergence in my area of specialization in context in employment rates among people with disabilities. And I've pulled some data from different sources. I'm not going to belabor these points, but I'm going to highlight a few key issues. And so these charts here are 2-line graphs, and they indicate, you know, rates of employment among people with disabilities over a span from 2009 to 2023. And you can see rates are very, very low from this graph, ranging from, you know, 19% to 22% with ups and downs. And then we look at women with disabilities specifically, and we see they tend to trail behind. And so they're always lower than the individuals with disabilities in general. And so what we see in data of people without disabilities is reflected in data for people with disabilities. Women trail behind men in employment rates. And then they also trail behind in a couple of other ways. And so if we could go to the next slide. So we have 2 graphs here as well that I thought were really interesting that I pulled. One is looking at employment by gender, disability, and age, and it compares people with disabilities to people without disabilities, and looks at different demographics, so men versus women, and in different age groups. And the summary point from that graph is that people with disabilities are employed significantly lower rates compared to people without disabilities, and that men are employed at higher rates than women in both categories. So women with disabilities are the least likely to be employed. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting talking point for our discussion today. Tied with employment, in my mind, is education. Having education, particularly a bachelor's degree or higher, also, you know, really affects higher level employment. And we're going to talk about how that affects women in a moment. But this graph, again, compares women with disabilities to women without disabilities, and men with disabilities and men without disabilities. And if you look, when you look at men and women without disabilities, by, you know, the end of the graph, the, you know, late 2020s, women are surpassing men in terms of bachelor degrees. And so, you know, we are making advancement in the general population, right? But when we look at men and women with disabilities, women are significantly less likely to have bachelor degrees than men. And so we're also falling behind in the disability field in that metric as well. And so I think, you know, these 2 things go hand in hand, right? Employment and education kind of feed off one another. And so when we think about strategies, we can come back to this point. Now, we're going to go on to my area of expertise, right? Neurodiversity. And so this is a very broad term, and it's often used incorrectly. Neurodiversity just simply refers to the range of individual differences in processing and how our brains work. And it includes people with disabilities and people without disabilities. It's just the full range of diversity in thinking styles and processing. When you have a different learning style compared to the general population, we refer to that as being neurodivergent or having a neurodivergence. And then people who have kind of more of the typical learning style would be neurotypical. Neurodivergent individuals span many categories: intellectual disabilities, mental health, giftedness, etc. My area of expertise is ASD. So I wanted to present a little bit of data for you now on that particular population. So ASD is very common, and the rates of autism are going up every time we measure it. And so now 1 in 36 children who are 8 years old in the US have a diagnosis of ASD, autism spectrum disorder. It's a very, very high number. And so when we think down the pike, we think in the future, all of those individuals will be, you know, joining the workforce, hopefully at some point, and we need to prepare for that. The unemployment rate in autism is still extremely high. And so we have about 85% of people on the autism spectrum who are unemployed. And of the neurodivergent disability categories, autism has the lowest rates of employment compared to their peers. An interesting stat that's going to affect how we think about this is that for every boy, for every girl identified with autism, there are 4 boys. So the gender ratio is very skewed. There are far fewer women who get a diagnosis. And that's a whole nother discussion for why that might be. But it means that most of the research that has been done on males. And so we don't know a lot about economic mobility, employment, education levels among women. The little bit of information that we have show that women on the spectrum have different issues than men. Even though we don't know a lot, we do know some things. So compared to men, women on the spectrum are likely to be overqualified or educated for the current positions they're in. They're less likely to remain enrolled in college, less likely to pursue STEM careers, have more concerns around socialization, work fewer overall hours than men, more likely to work in lower paying female associated jobs, and have different workplace challenges that come to bear, and especially with respect to gender-related expectations for the type of careers they go into, and then also on the job site for appearance and expectations for socializing, which then impact their upward mobility in the job field. And so I'm going to leave discussion of the next couple of slides, which are kind of what can we do about it, to when we get to the panel and we start talking about actually take-home points and calls to action. But in general, the key to successfully employing any person with disabilities is not only employing them, but doing so in a way that helps support their challenges so that their individual strengths can shine. So I'm going to close with that, and we will talk more about some strategies as we get to that part of the discussion.
Terrific. Thank you, Derosha. Right on time. And so we will have time in the Q&A when you're going to join us again. We have a wonderful group of attendees here and a lot of people who can make a difference with all the information you're going to get today. Please continue to participate as you are engaging in the chat. Please engage in the polls, because we use them. Actually, we don't do it just to make you work. We use the polls. We use the feedback from the exit survey. So I thank you very, very much in the whole team's name for participating. So on we go. I'm not supposed to introduce our panelists. I'm letting them introduce themselves in 2 minutes or less in context of this webinar. But I have to say that Virginia Jacko, when I joined the nonprofit world from the for-profit world, Virginia is one of the shining stars and one of the great leaders in our community. So thank you very much, Virginia, for trying to introduce yourself right now and for being with us.
I say thank you. And the slide that I selected is a bit unusual. It is the signature block on all of my emails. Why is that important today? So I am President and CEO of Miami Lighthouse for the Blind for the past 19 years. In 2005, when the Miami Lighthouse Board of Directors named me as their first totally blind president and CEO, one of those board members made this comment. Oh no, now the inmates are going to begin running the asylum. Now that is rude, that is crude, that is annoying. But what did I do about it? I said nothing, but that was my challenge. A, to have a board governance initiative. B, to be very, very successful. And so during the past 19 years, we created the Heiken Children's Vision Program, a statewide program to ensure that children in school that are struggling reading but is on the board get a dilated eye exam and prescription glasses. And then just a few years ago, we created our School for the Blind, Miami Lighthouse Academy, which is an early learning school for 1, 2, 3, 4-year-olds, and a kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, all in collaboration with Miami-Dade schools. When I began as president and CEO, the institution was serving 500 program participants. This past year, 26,000 program participants. So I say to everybody, whether you are not welcomed at the job interview as a female or as a person with a disability, stay with it and don't let some people that have no understanding of how successful a woman with a disability can be. Thank you for this opportunity.
Virginia, you are amazing. And I want you to know that there are emojis that our audience members can do. You've gotten applause and hearts, and we don't allow everybody to get on and clap because we never get the webinars done. But you're getting a lot of applause and a lot of gratitude for sharing your story and inspiring everyone so much. And now I'm going to pass it on to somebody else who's going to introduce herself, who needs no introduction. And I want to credit Commissioner Raquel Regalado with really helping us to focus today's Impact Collaborative and making sure that it happened. Thank you for your leadership, Commissioner, and thank you for being here.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's so wonderful to be on with such amazing women, and thank you for tackling this topic. You know, I spend so much time talking about inclusion, and unfortunately, we don't get a lot of bandwidth to talk about our girls and our women. So I really appreciate today, so we can kind of hone in on the challenges that women particularly face. So I want to thank Jen for her amazing, overview of neurodiversity. I wear a lot of hats. I am the proud parent of 2 neurodivergent adults, a boy and a girl. And I always tell people, I'm the freak at my house, being neurotypical, and I've learned more from them, and they have changed me more than I have changed them. And while when they were little, I would have given anything for my children to be neurotypical, I consider myself blessed to be the parent of neurodivergent individuals and an advocate for what they bring to the table and how they should be given a space. So really quickly, my daughter Isabella was a typical, ASD story. At 18 months, I took her to early steps. At the time, over 20 years ago, women were just not being diagnosed. She was an epileptic. And if you ever wonder why, we lighted up blue and everything's blue, as Jen was saying, it's because for many, many years, it was thought that this was something that only impacted men. So a lot of women were turned away. So Isabella is very typical in the sense that she received a delayed diagnosis. Most men receive their diagnosis 18 months, a year and a half. My daughter received her diagnosis at 6. Most women receive their diagnosis 2 to 6 years. And a lot of women today are receiving their ASD diagnosis as adults. Why is that? Because women can mask. And we'll be talking a little bit of that. Women actually, it's seen, what is neurodiversity is seen as something else. when they're young, it could be helpful because they don't have to deal with a lot of things, but at the same time, they don't receive resources. But as they get older, it really becomes an impediment to their success and their employment. So my daughter has autism spectrum disorder and ADHD. So we'll talk a little bit about how a lot of women have duality, on neurodiversity, and how it manifests itself completely differently. So my daughter's ADHD is hyperfocus, which is the opposite of what people think of when they hear ADHD. But it's been challenging to get her resources and challenging to get people to understand that she is employable. And that she has a skill set, because now that we talk more about employment and more about workforce, there is the tech myth that everybody assumes that everyone that has ADHD is tech savvy. Not always the case. They have a lot of different interests and a lot of different abilities. So there is a propensity to take the average ASD male and kind of project that on women. So women have a different skill set. They're usually interested in different issues. I get a lot of pushback from parents because there's more fear when it comes to females and allowing them into the workforce, whether it's transportation or actual employment. A lot of caregivers believe that because their child or adult is a female, that they'll be more prone to be abused or taken advantage of. So there's a lot of concerns around there, and a lot of caregivers hold them back for many, many years. And we don't get to train them for vocational programming and to really get them out in the workforce. And they have a lot of issues with self-esteem, as a result. So we're going to be talking about, employment in October, but I'm glad that we're talking about it here. And the key is less pity and more opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, so much for being here. We're going to hear more from you in a moment. Last but not least, my colleague on the Community Advisory Board for the Miami Foundation. So I'll see you right after this. Please introduce yourself in 2 minutes or less. Why are you here today? What do you do? Gonna have to unmute yourself though.
Oh my God. 4 years later, I'm still struggling with Zoom. Thank you for including us. So I'm the CEO for the Advocacy Network on Disabilities. And what we do is we champion the rights of individuals with intellectual, developmental, and other disabilities by promoting inclusion, providing services, and advancing systems change. So we work at the micro, the meso, and the macro levels with the goal of really making our community much more inclusive and able to break down the barriers. And I'm sorry, I have a little bit of ADHD myself, and I had to connect to my phone. So I'm having my phone, hearing myself on the phone. And so I'm an example of neurodivergence and what things can happen and how things you can do no matter what it is I'm gonna have to sign out. So this is exactly one of the things that happens with people with disabilities and women in particular. Like, I have never been formally diagnosed, and I'm a perfect example of how women get diagnosed way later in life, which doesn't mean that we cannot get places and we cannot accomplish things. Like Virginia shared, I've been the CEO for our organization for 3 years only, and in 3 years we have doubled the amount of people that we serve, doubled the amount of programs, moved into a different county to be able to provide those services. So the fact that I can get distracted with things doesn't necessarily mean that I cannot hyper-focus on other tasks when I have to do that. And we'll get a little bit more into the discrimination process that happens for people with disabilities and specifically with neurodivergence. And it starts out from the whole application process and how a lot of companies use some of the systems that companies use to select resumes when people apply online.
Oh, that's
discriminates.
perfect. If we can do that for what you're seeing in the next segment in our
Perfect. Thank you.
I love that. That's
Thank you.
super interesting. I want to make sure you have enough time to really get into that. So
Thank you for guiding me.
You're my sister. We're colleagues. This section is exactly what Iray's going to be talking about now when it gets back to you. We're going to ask Virginia to go first. Now, this segment, we ask everybody to do 3 minutes or less, so we do have time to get to the Q&A later. Virginia, what do we need to know that's going on in this sector? In this sector?
It's about vocational rehabilitation and job placement. So for people with a disability, especially if it's a vision disability, a hearing disability, it is a technical world, a technical workplace. Miami Lighthouse has emphasized the importance of the ADA law that all digital information must be accessible to people with disabilities. An example of that is I use screen reading software. And if I go to a website and there's an image, a logo, but there isn't text behind that logo, I'm shut out. It just says image, image, image. So getting companies and nonprofits, I believe, have been in advance of many corporations. The audit services that are available to ensure that websites are accessible help with employment. On top of that, vocational rehabilitation training, because we need to have the skills necessary to be successful. And in our Miami Lighthouse vocational rehabilitation training, the next step is job placement. And job placement involves Miami Lighthouse as an institution to have strong collaboration with corporations. In having that collaboration with corporations, our goal is that people with a vision disability are successfully employed. So in the next section, I'm going to give you some examples of tax credits and ways that people that want to encourage the employment of people with disabilities can move forward with a call to action. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Virginia. Commissioner, what do we need to know?
So, I think, Virginia covered some of it. We really do need a lot of vocational training. But one of the things that I talk to caregivers about, especially with women, is starting very early with our girls. So the first thing you have to do is expose them to a lot of different things so you can figure out what exactly is their skill set, what do they gravitate towards. And it actually does also help, with their behavioral therapy, because, that can be a positive, right? When we talk about positive conditioning and positive reinforcement. So a lot of parents kind of let girls, lag behind. They are very proactive when it comes to males and finding them like a skill set and really talking to them about the expectation of work. We have a tendency to not do that with girls, especially in Hispanic communities. So, one of the things that we need to do is start early, trying to figure out what they excel at, what are their abilities, instead of focusing so much on their disabilities. The diagnosis is important because it helps you to understand these things manifest differently, in women. So we always talk about pushing and trying to get that diagnosis, even if you're turned away. I was turned away from 18 months to 6 years. I literally tried every 6 months until I got my diagnosis. So it's really important for folks to be, persistent. And then once you have something that there's an interest and you've been really working on, this concept of work and chores at home and responsibilities and being responsible for certain things, then you can get into that vocational training. And we're really working on that vocational training with our educational partners, like the Lighthouse and like Miami-Dade County Public Schools, and then also Kendall Campus, where we have a pilot. So we have all these different pilots, all this different programming that now when they're teenagers, they can start moving towards. My daughter, for example, is in the culinary program at Easter Seals. She just graduated. I actually put her in that culinary program on the after school side at 10. So, that way she got acclimated to it, and she did the high school for 5 years. So, it's really important for them to have a skill set. In the case of Isabella, she works 4 hours a day in a kitchen. and she's moving towards, you know, permanent work. So it's really important for parents to do that piece. Transit, transit, transit. Mobility. You know, we've actually partnered with, you know, Miami Impact Lab, and we're going to be giving more information to folks in October. We did it last October with My Ability. If you want to follow that account and you want to see what we did last year, you know, we found that the #1 impediment was transit. So for those of you who follow me, you know, at Miami-Dade County, we trained all of our police officers and our first responders so that we would have less Baker Acts and less arrests. Jen and you and NSU Card, we've hijacked them and they've done this training for us. They're amazing, amazing partners. But it was really important to deal with the public safety piece because so many caregivers were concerned that, you know, if their adults went into the community, that they would be arrested and Baker Acted. On the gender side, we have less arrests with women and more Baker Acting. And that's one of the, you know, issues that we see play out even in the workforce, where neurodiversity is seen as being emotional or crazy, you know, as opposed to what it is, which is neurodiversity and requiring understanding and acceptance and accommodation, right? So with women, we see that it gets skewed in a very particular way. And it's really about educating people about how neurodiversity impacts women and how ADHD and ASD and dyslexia and all these things play out differently for females and what those accommodations are. But mobility and transit is an important piece of that because they have to get to that job and they have to get back from that job. And if you're relying on the caregiver, you know, to be the forever Uber driver, you know, it's never going to work. I put my daughter on STS at 12 and everybody was horrified. She's still using STS now, and now I'm training her to use public transit, right? But a lot of caregivers are really concerned when it comes to women and safety and security. And you can actually train for that also. Lawrence Kids has a wonderful curriculum specifically for disabilities, where you can train, you know, children, boys and girls, about what is appropriate and is not appropriate. So there's a lot of tools out there to do that work. It's just a matter of having those difficult, you know, conversations. And then moving forward, you know, really getting employers to understand that women have amazing abilities and that they need a seat at the table. You know, we live in such a diverse community. And one of the things that I ask people is, in the same way that Miami-Dade County has embraced diversity, you know, in terms of gender and ethnicity, you know, to embrace intellectual diversity and the fact that neurodivergent people not only deserve a seat at the table, but really bring value. So our next step is to train transit and park employees. So you can look forward to that next year, and to really continue opening up public spaces and educating people so that they know how to interact with neurodiverse individuals. So whether it's the Sunflower Lanyard, you know, or the training, it's really important for us to continue educating our community.
Terrific. Thank you, Commissioner. Ire, what are you seeing? What are the things that we need to know that are going on? And this portion again is 3 minutes or less, and then we'll go on to everybody on the solutions. I love what you were telling us before. Please take it away.
Right. So I'm part of a collaborative with women, professional women that are neurodivergent internationally. And some of the things that we're seeing is that the discrimination happens, and it happens more for women than for men because of what has been said already. Women are diagnosed later. There are a lot of the women in that collaborative were diagnosed in their 30s and their 40s, and they had no idea, other than the diagnosis was such a sense of relief for them, where they were like, oh my God, this makes so much sense now. Why my entire life I have felt like such an outsider. So some of the things that we're seeing is, as we're seeing artificial intelligence being used more and more, the hiring process, and I'm going to address specifically the hiring and the working piece of this, although we can have an all-day conversation about all of this. From the hiring process and some of the mechanisms that are used to identify and to screen.
One notification. Messages. Now. 89,880 messages. Now. 89 unmuted.
I lost the connection, Lisa. I lost the connection. Hello?
Ire,
Hello, can you still see me?
Yes,
you're
thank you.
frozen, but we
Thank you.
can hear
Sorry
you.
about
Go
that.
ahead.
Am I still on?
Yes,
Yes,
thank
you
you.
are.
Thank you. So, from the process of identifying, when people apply for jobs, from the process of identifying resumes, a lot of the programs that are in place now screen out certain, because of the way the resumes are written, screen out people with neurodivergence. And so there are communities that help people write their resumes in such a way that they get screened in. Then there's the interviewing process. Part of what happens during interviews is
Okay, we seem to be having a connection problem. So I'm going to go ahead and let everybody know that we do have a really important polling question, and it answers many of the questions that you've all been putting in the chat. Would you be interested in being contacted or connected with any of our panelists? Our team, we're not jealous. We don't need you to come through the Women's Fund to be in touch with our brilliant panelists and keynote today. Please let us know, and our team will follow up and connect you afterwards. Virginia, for example, there are a couple of the leaders here who've been saying that it would be great to have some presentations to some of their providers. Thema Campbell from Girl Power is saying that. So we do have a mechanism set up to support ongoing work. We don't just come in and come out here. Ire, I think that was great, and hopefully we'll be able to hear you better, and you can add that to what we can do. Okay, so we're going to go on to that section now. Solutions, Virginia. What are your calls to action, and what can we do? Again, this segment's 3 minutes.
As part of the call to action, employers need to know that there are tax credits. So, for example, there's a small business tax credit for bringing people back to work. There's also tax credits for people that have been on welfare, the welfare to work tax credit. In addition to that, though, there are wraparound services, and I'm going to focus on Miami Lighthouse and the Florida Division of Blind Services. So what are wraparound services? Once the individual gets the job offer, these wraparound services begin. For example, transportation, ensuring that that individual has transportation. Another example and a worry is liability insurance. During any training program for someone with a vision disability, the Florida Division of Blind Services will provide liability insurance when it is one of their placements of a person with a vision disability. In addition, providing any additional orientation and mobility. So while I am totally blind, if I'm beginning a new job, of course, I'm going to want to know where's the ladies' room. And a visually impaired person, once they learn, okay, 4 steps to the left, 20 steps down the hall, on the right, not the first door, that's the men's room, second door, that's the women's room. That's what an orientation mobility specialist would do in orienting the new employee to their environment. So those are just a few examples, and I welcome questions, but wraparound services mean that we are there to ensure that the individual is successful. And we're fortunate in this county to have special transportation services. There isn't other states that have this opportunity, and we're just working with STS. So when there are issues and the individual is late to work, meeting with the county and talking about the fact that we have certain issues, I have always found the county special transportation service wanting to work with us to ensure people can be employed.
Terrific. Thank you so very much, Virginia. Commissioner Regalado, what are your calls to action? What can we do?
Yes, I want to thank Virginia for her STS shout out. STS recently added Vicky who is their community service liaison. And once you contact the county and tell them that the ride is about employment, we can change things. We're actually working on a new program. We're going to change the trapeze system. So STS on the tech side is going to be a lot more helpful and easier to navigate. I always tell parents, sign up early, get your kids used to using STS, get used to using STS, use it online. The online system, is much better than having to call if you can, and, buy the voucher. So there's lots of different things. And once you have your STS card, you can use public transit for free. So then you can start the training to use public transit, right? And like I said, we're training our public transit workers. We're going to be rolling out the Sunflower Lanyard, which is for invisible disabilities, intellectual disabilities. We have several programs at the airport. We're going to be doing the port too. And it's really important for parents to understand that we're doing our piece, but they have to come out and participate in this programming. Some of the programming that we're doing on the educational side, it's difficult, if not impossible, to recruit women. So we need parents to start, kind of moving the ball forward early, and making plans for these young women so that they can go to school and they can work, and so that they have the expectation of work. So, it's difficult for us, to create more programming if we don't see the demand. So we keep telling our parents to kind of keep moving forward with us. It's not a perfect system, but it's a system that can be made better, but we need people to participate. One thing was mentioned, and I know that Michael, Alessandra, and Card, and Jen, we've all talked about this so many times, and every time we sit down with employers, we mention it. The way that they write these job descriptions are daunting for people who have ASD and have neurodiversity. So we're working with our partners, to change that, and so that they change the interview process. So the interview process is less about one-on-one, kind of, are you making eye contact and talking to me, which is a very neurotypical kind of mindset, and more about, can you do the work, and watching that person do the work and do the task. So we have a lot of new partners that we're going to be rolling out in October that want to do this work, that want to provide accommodations, that understand the value in neurodivergent workforce. They're dedicated, they want to be there, they have longevity, they stay in these jobs, for a very long time. You're not going to lose your training. They're not going to hop around every year, like most employees. So we have a real opportunity here. And finally, on the other side, as consumers, one of the things that we always tell folks that think that this is important is patronize people that do this work. We have a lot of local employers that employ adults with disability. Pinecrest Bakery, Azucar Ice Cream. We have Our Grounds, we have all these different, Goodwill, obviously, we have all these different companies that are doing this work with us. And we're actually going to be rolling out a Google map so that you can see where these folks are, where they're employing our adults, who they're partnering with, so that you can choose them. Because, the more that we support them, the more that it makes sense. And the last thing I will say on this, because the election is in 19 days, I know that parents struggle a lot with guardianship, and I get a lot of questions about guardianship. It is so important for people with disabilities to be engaged and to vote. You need to vote, and you need to vote for advocates, and you need to tell people about our issues. We have a right to make this a top priority. The numbers are there. It's just about speaking up as a community and demanding that this be prioritized. We don't need pity, we need opportunity. And the lack of discrimination is not inclusion. Where we are right now is at the lack of discrimination. What we need is inclusion. And we all need to demand that of our elected officials, and employers want to do this work, but we need to support them when they do this work. And really, what I ask everyone to consider today is a call to action, right? This has to be a priority for our community. And we need to have elected officials who support the organizations that are doing this and put money behind these efforts. These things don't happen organically. They need support.
Very powerful. Thank you so much, Commissioner. Thank you so much. Ray, I'm hoping that we've got good audio. If not, the Commissioner just covered something for you that you were telling us about. So that's terrific. What a team. What a team.
Right, what a team. Exactly. That's so I'll skip all of that stuff. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for covering all that. What I wanted to add to what the Commissioner has said is that we really need to move beyond inclusion. We need to move towards belonging. And so how do we look at belonging and making sure that people understand that they belong? And so I have two calls to action. One of them has to do with autism acceptance in the workplace, and what do we do? And so let's go to the autism acceptance in the workplace, and what can we do as employers, but also what can we do as co-workers? I guarantee you that everyone that's sitting here has co-workers that are neurodivergent, either neurodivergent because they have ADHD, they may have autism, they may, there's a whole spectrum. Dyslexia falls into the neurodivergent umbrella. And so what can we do at work? Some of the things that the first thing to remember is that if you know one person who's neurodivergent, you know one person who's neurodivergent. Not everybody is the same. Just like if you know one Black person, you know one Black person, they're not all the same. If you know one Cuban like me, you know one Cuban, we're not all the same. We're all different people. And so the most important thing is to engage in dialogue with people and ask them what they want and what they need. But there are certain things that we know that people have in common, and these actually fall into the category of universal design. Like universal design means that everyone can use it, whether they have a disability or don't have a disability. Like door handles rather than doorknobs, curb cuts. How great is it when you walk into a store or you walk out of the store and your hands are full of bags that the door opens automatically? That's happened because of the ADA, but I definitely benefit from it. It's not just for people in wheelchairs. And so just like we wouldn't expect an employee or a coworker that uses a wheelchair to climb up the steps, we wouldn't expect somebody that's neurodivergent to relate to us and to respond to things in the same way. So some of those things are the flexible hours, clean and clear communications are essential for everybody, right? Not just for people with neurodivergence. And then Cuenca, what can we do as a society and as a community to move into that place of acceptance and belonging? And some of the things that we can do is on our websites, like look at your own website, when you have pictures of people, how many people are you representing that may have a disability, so that people with disabilities know they are welcome and they're wanted at your place. Ask people questions, ask them how do they want to be addressed? There's people that want to be a person with autism, there's people that want to be autistic, and everybody belongs and everybody contributes. There's one of the things that you can join if you want to do more is autisticadvocacy.org. They have a newsletter and they put things out like right now, for example, one of the things they're working on is getting Congress to include disability in one of the bills that they're going through passing. And I don't want to go over my time, so I think I'll stop here. But the important thing to remember is that it isn't the disability that makes someone disabled, it's the barriers that we have in society that make someone disabled.
So wonderful and so powerful what you said. I know I've learned so much today and continue to learn, and the Q&A is starting now. So please participate in the poll. Dr. DeRocher, please join us. Again, this universal use design that you're talking about, right? Really, I'm going to co-opt that for what we do at the Women's Fund, because we're not against anyone else, however anybody else identifies. But if you don't put a specific lens on gender, you see that most systems were designed by men and not necessarily for women. And we have vestiges, so we need to rejig, upgrade, or build brand new systems. And that definitely applies to today. So thank you so much for those amazing insights. We're going to go, the first question is for you, Commissioner Regalado. In reference to skill sets for women with autism, what areas have you found that they are most skilled in? And also, what advice would you give an employer who's pushing a company that serves women and kids with disabilities in the beauty industry?
Oh, very interesting. We have a program at Kendall campus, Miami-Dade, where we're doing data analytics. And we spent a lot of time recruiting women. We did find some, but the majority of the women that we found had not taken a basic computer class, so they couldn't apply. So a lot of parents of neurodivergent boys push them into tech to see if something takes, but for some reason the women don't. So even though there is this tech myth, there are women that do well in tech, but they need to take those initial courses in web design and basic computer programming to see if that's something they can do. And we did find some females that did that. There's a lot of women in animation. I actually have a project with Film London, and they have an amazing program where they've hired 5 of our neurodivergent adults that live here that work in animation for Film London. And there's a lot of women that, once they're exposed to animation, they really love it. They love the storytelling. With Easter Seals, we worked with the Greater Miami Visitors and Convention Bureau, and we hired some of those graduates to be greeters at the convention center. Women are very good at making connections and helping people, and getting them to different places. And the culinary, the women usually excel. Right? We have boys also, but there's a lot of women in the culinary program that excel. Customer service is a surprisingly good area. That's why we're also doing data analytics, because data analytics and cybersecurity are areas where they do well. But really, it's about, figuring out what that person feels comfortable with, if they're an introvert or an extrovert. I always tell people neurodiversity doesn't change that. We have introverts that are neurodiverse and extroverts that are neurodiverse, and you have to lean into that and really give them opportunities to see what they feel comfortable with. And they will surprise you. In the case of, a lot of the women that we've placed, most of them are, extroverts. But we have found some placement for the introverts at bakeries, kind of behind the scenes, packing. Right now, Best Buddies has a program with one of our airline partners, and they do the packing behind the scenes of parts. So there's lots of different spaces where you can do this work. It's really finding where that individual feels comfortable. We're currently working with the cruise industry, and there's a lot of opportunities with the cruise industry on the forward facing and on the back office. And there's a lot of women that are interested in that area too. Beauty, I will tell you, in the beauty industry, I haven't had any partners. I would love to have some partners. I will tell you, my daughter would absolutely love it. There's a huge interest in that, just in general. So that would be an amazing area that we could explore.
I'm hoping that everyone in the audience did click on the poll who wants to be connected later, but I want to say that there's several different offers and questions here, and I want to make sure that our team makes sure that Virginia's team gets all of these. Virginia, there's one person who, I think it's a person who asked the same question. I don't want to assume that she launched a partner with Freebie for free salon rides for mothers and kids with disabilities. So wouldn't that be terrific to look at? Charlie, we love the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, and thank you so much for being here. Charlene just shared a great resource on universal design, aka targeted universalism. So I just want to make sure that our team makes sure that everybody gets these resources. Again, this webinar is being recorded, and people have asked that. It will be on our website tomorrow. It will be in our YouTube. And we beg you to chop, slice, see the whole thing, use a portion of one of the speakers today. That's terrific. I'm going to go on to the next question. How can we connect within our community to be able to participate with working in collaboration in support of neurodiversity awareness and neuroinclusion? I've worked in this field for 15 years, and since moving to Miami have really struggled to find companies and education organizations interested in forming partnerships. Who would like to take this question?
It's called My Ability. So MIA Ability. We launched this last year. So we have a social media. We're launching a website. You can contact me on social media or at our office. And we've really gotten a lot of resources. And the idea is it's this one space, right, where everyone can kind of come in and talk about these issues. When we did our event last year, we had Microsoft. We have a lot of heavy hitters that are doing this work. So whether it's, contacting the Lily DeMoya Foundation, or working with Best Buddies, or contacting Friendship Circle for adult, daycare, or Casa Familia for housing. The idea is to find this will be a space where everyone can kind of plug in and where you can get specific information on what these different organizations are doing in Miami-Dade County specifically.
That's
I'd like to chime in really quickly on that as well. Raquel, thanks for that. That is going to be an amazing resource. It already is, and I know you guys are building it out and day by day, and it's a fantastic resource. I think also to kind of go on a theme that you hit before about how lack of discrimination is not inclusion, right? I think we need to think about what we can do on an individual basis, especially if we're a small business owner or a large business owner, how can we make our space more inclusive and inviting and supportive for people with various disabilities? For autism specifically, we do have an autism-friendly initiative, which works with businesses in order to kind of guide them in how to make their space more accommodating for people with disabilities. And I think when we set the stage as a community for inclusivity, many of the other aspects that we're talking about are easier to implement.
And I'll just, Jen is too kind. They've done such amazing work with our museums, with small partners, with large partners. So now, everyone at these different establishments that has the designation of autism friendly has had the training, has the sensory kit, has the social story, understands, and can truly be inclusive.
Exactly. And we need this for all disabilities, not just autism. Many of the strategies we use for autism will be helpful. Like Iris said before, universal design, right? Many of the strategies will be helpful for all, but we also do need to look at spaces in an individual specific disability supports because they do differ.
Virginia, I've never seen anybody more successful in working with companies and other education organizations and partnerships. Can you give some good advice?
We do send out our orientation mobility specialists to the workplace. For example, Bascom Palmer Eye Institute, part of the University of Miami. Carol Brady Simmons, our Chief Program Officer, is actually on their committee for people with disabilities and has helped ensure that the flow with the patients is something that a person with a disability is able to successfully navigate. So for any institution, we even helped the Ford Foundation some years ago talk about, as they did an expansion, a good design is a design for all, a universal design. And it's not only the physical space, but it also is the digital space. So Miami Lighthouse Audit Team is available for anyone that wants to know, is there digital information accessible? Or is their physical space accessible, and what changes can be made?
Thank you so much, Virginia. There is clamoring in the chat asking for these resources that you've all been mentioning. So I'm going to ask all of our speakers today to please, the wonderful Daniela Luna, who organized this convening today, and ask Danny to do something special and make sure that we get all of the links to all of the resources that you've all just mentioned. And Danny, if we can send those out, please, to everybody who attended today, because we've got everybody's logins. I want to say that your focus is our power, You can focus with this even more if you want to be part of the volunteer corps and become even more involved with the Women's Fund. Danny also organizes the quarterly impact agents. You can participate by fueling our mission, because we cannot do this incredible work that we're doing and bring us all together if we don't have folks fueling our mission, attending our Raise the Bar fundraiser with the legal community in October, Power of the Purse in March, or just a small donation today. We're really, really grateful. I really want to say that focusing on the county budget, the county commission, so Commissioner Regalado and all of her colleagues will be going through approving, changing, editing the budget that the mayor will be presenting. The commission really needs our input. And so the Women's Fund every year, at least since I've taken over, has gone to speak to the commissioners about things that we notice. So we're really focusing on the proposed budget and how women and girls are reflected, right? What do we need to know? For example, expansion of the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center. We've been looking at that for a couple of years. We're not screaming, we have to have this happen. We're saying, how can we make this happen? Because the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center is really close to me here in Coconut Grove. But if you're down south, or if you're up north and you're under duress and you don't have a lot of time keeping away from your predator, you don't really have time. So I know our incredible staff in the county has been working on this. Things like that will be reflected in the budget. So for the third year in a row, Mayor Levine-Cava and many of her staffers will present a town hall with a focus on where women and girls are reflected in that budget. We don't have the exact date yet, but it'll be end of August, beginning of September. And you know us, we send out a lot of e-blasts. So we'll make sure that you know we had over 200 attendees last time, and we had close to 50 organizations like the Y and Girl Power who are with us today, and many, many others who were joining us. We do the organization, but all of their logos are there. So we ask you to join us for that. And then our next Impact Collaborative will be on another incredibly important topic, the online mind, mental health and safety in the digital age. It's all over the news, but we are here to give you focus on what you need to know and what you can do. And so we welcome you to our next Impact Collaborative from your Women's Fund. Thank you all so much for being here. Panelists, Dr. DeRocher, thank you.
Thank you for the privilege.
Yes,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. What a wonderful
Wonderful.
event.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much for focusing us. Have a terrific day, everyone.